We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki spiritual relationship to this land, and we seek to honor their living traditions. We hope to learn from them how we can respect Mother Earth and each other.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to play for you now a piece of organ music called Adoration by the American composer Florence Price. Florence Price was a Black composer and organist from the early 20th century, and much of her work went unplayed for many years, but it is currently becoming more and more popular. And I hope you enjoy this piece.
Thank you, Ronnie. That was beautiful. Greetings, friends. Good morning. Welcome to CVUUS, our remote service on this beautiful, crisp first Sunday in May. May is such a beautiful month. I look out my window here at my desk and I see an emerald world. Those April showers have turned everything so green. The daffodils are hanging on beautifully. Trees are budding out. The grass is saying to me, I need to be mown, Carl. So welcome. It's good to be together again. Today's service is being led by our minister, Barnaby Feeder. I'm Carl Lindholm, a member of the congregation, and I'm today's worship associate. At CVUS, as our mission states, we strive to be an inclusive and welcoming community that sustains a liberal religious tradition. We aspire to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility. We nurture and empower each other at all ages, all stages, and all ages on our spiritual journeys, and we reach out to the larger communities of which we are a part. If you're visiting today, perhaps for the first time, please check us out at our website, cvuus.org. You'll get a sense of who we are and what we do. For those of you who out in here, who are members of our congregation or come on occasion, I hope you have looked at the weekly blast that Laura sends out every week. It's full of information about what we are up to and other relevant matters. Please do stay today for the virtual coffee hour after the service. If you have a milestone or passage for Barnaby that you haven't already passed on to him, please include that in the chat space at the bottom of your screen. Let us worship together. The call to worship today is by David Vumbaugh, a minister emeritus of the Unitarian Church of Summit, New Jersey. We are here dedicated to the proposition that beneath all our differences, behind all of our diversity, there is a unity that binds us together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity. The chalice lighting is the one that Bobby Carnwath chose last week. It encapsulates so succinctly what we are about as Unitarian Universalists. As the words appear on your screen, please read them along with me. Love is our doctrine. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer.
How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're
Good morning. That was beautiful singing. So I'm Poppy, Director of Religious Exploration. And our Time for All Ages today is something that might not seem like it fits in this service, that is a pretty serious service, really. And the Time for All Ages is video highlights from a stuffy sleepover that we did a week ago with 20 stuffies from 12 families. And I mean, it's pretty fun and parts of it are kind of funny, but I guess what I would say from my end of it is I haven't gotten to be with the kids in the building or with the kids in person much at all this whole year. So their stuffies were as close as it got for me. And before the kids sent the stuffies off, they were all sent a Google form to fill out, that parents filled out with kids, where the kids were asked things like the name of your stuffy and their pronouns and what would they enjoy doing at CVUUS. Anything we need to know about food preferences, allergies, all the normal sleepover things we would ask. Permission, there was a permission slip. And the answers were just so amazingly wonderful. So I'm going to be sharing a link in the blast that has the answers to these forms because they're just so great. And the video really doesn't do justice to the very caring, thoughtful words from all these kids about their stuffies and how some of them are sleeping away from home for the first time and have a hard time going to sleep, and they might need a buddy. And I don't know, they were just really pretty great. So it actually was fantastic to be in the Fen House with all of them. So for me, there is a very serious aspect to this whole thing, even though a lot of it is kind of goofy. So I hope you enjoy it, and look for the sign up info if that interests you in the blast to come. All right, let's see if I can get this guy going. Oh, I need to say one more thing. I had massive technical difficulties making this, so I need to say a huge, huge thank you to my 9th grade son, Milo, who managed to pull off a video last night at 1 a.m. So if there are some tech issues, that's why. And if it weren't for him, you'd be seeing nothing but me telling you about stuffies. All right, here we go. So there you go. Some highlights. I had to apologize to Laura for what happened with the photocopier. I think Penguin was not doing a great job chaperoning there, but things happen. So, yeah, it just brings me a lot of joy to see that. I just want to add one note. There's a shot in there, I don't know if anybody noticed, of some of the stuffies with the New Yorker magazine. That was because Anna Duquette Hoffman's stuffy, Real Estate Agent 51, the thing that she wanted to do at CVUUS was discuss politics. So, which makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense to do that at a UU sleepover. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. And to all the kids and everybody watching this, I love you a lot. And I really hope, I hope you have a great week. I also hope you come pick up your stuffies from my mudroom if you haven't already. And to the kids, the older kids who are going back to in-person school this week, they're going from 2 days to 4 days. It's a really big transition. I'm really holding you guys, and I hope that you find that it brings you more joy than you suspect, which I think it will. So that's me. And now on to our dearest Reverend Barnaby to introduce the offering.
So, of course, Poppy was concerned that this wouldn't fit in with the rest of the service. It's right dead center in what this service is about, as I'm sure you'll see as we go along. And it just so happens that the donations team, more than 2 months ago, said that we wanted to do something about gun violence this month. And our donee is Sandy Hook Promise, which grew out of concerns about gun violence and kids. Noting how precious they are. So I invite you to watch this introductory film from Sandy Hook Promise, and then to give as generously as you're able during our offering.
On December 14th, 2012, the community of Newtown, Connecticut was changed forever. 26 innocent lives were lost at Sandy Hook Elementary School to senseless, preventable gun violence. But soon after, some of the families who lost loved ones came together and turned their tragedy into a moment of transformation. This transformation became Sandy Hook Promise, an organization dedicated to ensuring that no student or community ever experiences the devastating effects of a school shooting.
We train students and teachers and parents how to recognize those warning signs and then how to take the appropriate next step to get that person help before it becomes a tragedy.
It all starts with our Know the Signs violence prevention programs, which have been saving lives and changing school cultures across the nation. Start with Hello teaches students how to reach out to isolated individuals, while Say Something teaches youth and adults to recognize warning signs and reach out to a trusted adult or submit a tip anonymously. Students Against Violence Everywhere, or SAVE Promise Clubs, empower students to sustain these programs and lead the cultural change in their schools and communities. These programs, supported by SAVE Promise Clubs in thousands of schools, have already trained millions of youth and adults across the country. But their greatest impact has been saving lives.
I think that Sandy Hook Promise has affected our school's community and our community at large to recognize that we all play a part in keeping each other safe.
Implementing the anonymous reporting app has broken down barriers between adults and students to make us a healthier and a safer community.
The Sandy Hook Promise has affected our school by helping us bring hope that one day kids won't have to worry about school shootings.
We're also continuing our strong track record of passing bipartisan, sensible policy. We've helped to pass numerous extreme risk protection order laws at the state level and are creating additional support at the federal level. From the Mental Health Reform Act in 2016 to the STOP Act of 2018, we've led legislation that has generated millions of dollars for schools to implement violence prevention programs and continue to help students and save lives. Sandy Hook Promise has quickly grown into a nationwide movement by answering the call for a solution to gun violence that everyone can take part in. One that is training 2 generations and delivering sustainable change by teaching and proving that gun violence is preventable when you know the signs.
There are no disadvantages to this program. It promotes a culture of wellness. The program will help your school. The program will make you feel safe.
I think it needs to be available to all schools so that all kids will be safer in the future.
Every school needs it, not just the one that had the shooting.
It not only opens the door to talk about it, it has structure, it has information, it has support, it has everything that you need so that you can not only open the door for the students to talk about it, but you can find a resource to help them.
We thank you, our incredibly dedicated and committed base of supporters, for joining us, being a part of the change, and most importantly, saving lives.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in that offering. There's always a time in our service of silence and prayer for people to get in touch with what's on their hearts in terms of joys, concerns, milestones that they chose not to share today. It's a very important part of locating where we are spiritually and emotionally as we spend this time together. And before I invite you into that time of silence, I'm going to just mention that the music that you'll hear coming out, We Remember Them, was recorded by the choir of the Unitarian Church in Palo Alto, California. They've given us permission to use it. Actually, it's 2 people from the choir. It's a duet. And this is in honor of my preaching to them in a few hours in return for Amy Zucker Morgenstern visiting us last January. So this is all about our connections to the wider UU world. I'll invite you to enjoy that music coming out of our time of silence and prayer.
Our first reading, our ancient reading, is from Galatians, book 3, verses 27 and 28. This reading is believed to be advice sent by the Apostle Paul, roughly 30 years after the death of Jesus, to church congregations Paul had helped organize in what is now central Turkey. The congregations included Jews and non-Jewish members who had embraced the worship of Jesus as the Son of God. They were frequently riven by arguments over which Jewish laws the newcomers to the faith needed to adopt. In the letter's most famous passage, Paul insisted that faith in Jesus was all that non-Jews needed to be saved, summing up his more universalist point of view with the words, "As many of you were baptized into Christ, have clothed yourself with Christ, there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Jesus Christ." Our modern reading is Marginal Wisdom by Reverend Leslie Takahashi, and it was published in 2002. They teach us to read in black and white. Truth is this, the rest is false. You are whole or broken. Who you love is acceptable or not. Life tells its truth in many hues. We are taught to think in either or, to believe the teaching of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential or a power beyond a single will. I am broken or I am powerful. Life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. We are taught to see ourselves in absolutes, good versus evil, male versus female, old versus young, gay versus straight. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. The day is coming when all will know that the rainbow world is more gorgeous than the monochrome, that a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course, that the margins hold the center.
Thank you, Carl. Pan and I were dodging showers on our walk Friday when I ran into Philia, the uniquely brilliant saw-whet owl and friend of CVUUS, who has been visiting with me on and off since December. She was perched deep inside her favorite local haunt, an evergreen thicket at the edge of a meadow nearby an abandoned section of Old Middle Road. Philia told me she sensed I needed her help for today's sermon. I could scarcely deny it. A few months ago, the worship team decided that marginalization would be a good theme for May, I explained. So many justice issues stem from people with power and privilege putting their interests at the center of every discussion, policy, and social activity. That forces others to the margins of society. But the more I thought about what kind of sermon I could write, the more it felt like I was planning a 15-minute tour of the Pacific Ocean in a rowboat, simply defining the terms that come up over and over when we talk about marginalization. Things like systemic racism, intersectionality, decentering whiteness, and woke takes forever if you're going to really dig into what they mean. And quite frankly, it makes worship feel like a workshop. It occurred to me to call on you for help simplifying things, Philia, but then I remembered that Carl is the worship associate today. When I share our conversations with the congregation, I always counted on one of our female worship associates speaking your words. You know, out of respect for your strong gender identification as a female. I've never forgotten how much you resented being named Rocky by the kind folks who rescued you after you got trapped in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree when it was tied up for shipment to New York City last November. They just assumed you were male.
Yeah, that irritated me no end. But I'm absolutely cool with Carl. After all, he's your biggest worship associate. And now that I'm nearly a year old, it's clear that we saw-whet females are always bigger than the males. It's good for the guys to respect that now that I find myself protecting my eggs.
Philia, eggs, congratulations. Who's the lucky guy?
Who cares? He's not smart about much anything except catching voles and mice. I'm going to have to leave him for good even before the chicks are ready to leave the nest. He's going to finish off the last couple weeks of parenting. If it's a good summer, I'll probably hook up with another guy and have more egg guarding to do by the late July.
Well, then my sermon problems might be a little too community-centered to be of much interest to you. I bit off more than I could comprehend when I promised the congregation to speak about who gets left out, kept out, thrown out of our efforts to build beloved community, where that leaves them and where that leaves us.
It's true. I'm not community-minded when it comes to other owls, but I'm fascinated by communities of humans. You are almost never truly alone, although many of you feel lonely at times. So building what you call beloved community seems pretty important. By the way, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not sure. A philosopher named Josiah Royce invented the term, and he used it to say you don't need God to define how important it is for us anyway, to live in community grounded in love and related moral values. Because one way or another, we humans are going to be defined by our relationships to communities. As he put it in 1913, my life means nothing, either theoretically or practically, unless I am a member of a community. Many decades later, the God-fearing Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used his vision of beloved community frequently to preach about how people should treat each other, create justice, and seek harmony. His was always a vision of more inclusion and less exclusion. Basically, his vision seems to be any ideal form of community for people who believe in justice and compassion.
Oh, so that's why it's important to know who feels like they belong at CVUS and why, and also who feels excluded and why. If you present good answers, you'll be a hero.
But that's just it. There are no good answers, or at least no simple ones. It's an issue religions have wrestled with even before the term beloved community existed. The Bible often talks about a realm of justice and joy and beauty called heaven and ways that earth could become heavenly. But it kept coming back to prophets like Jesus saying there's one telltale sign of heaven. That sign is that things that divide us into different identities fade in importance. What counts, these prophets preached, is recognizing our common humanity and our common need to be in right relationship with God. You know, all that in heaven, there's neither Greek nor Jew, slave nor master, male nor female language, in passages like chapter 3 of Galatians. But we aren't wired to shed our identities easily. We tend to treasure them, in fact, unless we are relentlessly taught to hate ourselves. And if we end up with an identity imposed on us to our detriment, we'll eventually come together with others like us to claim it as beautiful in some ways that our oppressors don't recognize. Black is beautiful, gay pride. These aren't just slogans. These are like judo moves to turn oppression into strength. Heck, even the names Unitarian and Universalist, which mainline Puritans used as an insult, hurled at neighbors they saw as heretics, ended up being claimed as truthful and beautiful by our religious forebears.
So, beloved community is all about people's social identities. No room for owls in the beloved community?
Well, a lot of people must think that, judging from how we act. No wonder we have a climate crisis brewing because of how people treat our companions on Earth as well as each other. We need to go way beyond humans in answering questions like, who are my kin and neighbors? All the way, not just to real owls, but also to those who take up residence in our imaginations. In some ways, that would simply be returning to the wisdom of many indigenous people.
Don't accuse me of being unreal. You might as well deny that you are real. You would be better off becoming clearer about my role in your beloved community. One thing bothering me is all those words you don't want to define.
Like intersectionality?
Yes. What the heck does that mean to you? Who talks like that?
Well, academics and social activists trying to impress each other talk like that. It means basically that every form of injustice is related and affects each group of people differently. It spotlights why the interconnected web of injustice is so complex and hard to unravel. I guess you could also say it's a warning to people at the center of power or people who benefit from their social status to be more humble. They simply don't get all the forces that make oppressed groups feel marginalized. It's too overwhelmingly complex for the victims themselves to fully understand it. So what hope is there for those who are happier when they're not looking?
So it's a widespread form of what that writer Upton Sinclair said about it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Why don't you just say that? Just be honest about how hard it is for people to take off their personal blinders to so many interconnected disasters and abuses.
My God, Philia, when did you find time to read Upton Sinclair?
I haven't. Don't ask. And don't change the subject. I'm right. People have invented countless ways of seeing things that normal owls can't. You also have countless things you see as real, like race, that science tells you aren't. But you also are unfortunately blind to many realities that are staring you in the face. You are gluttons for misinformation. Something in you just loves how fake news makes you feel at times.
That's true. Is it hopeless to try and talk to the congregation about a deeply thorny topic like who gets marginalized, how it happens, and what we can do about it?
No, you have a lot of potential help from the voices of the marginalized, especially once you accept they are more like you than not. And among them are many poets. No one is better than a good poet or singer for showing you the issue in language. As one poet put it, that is in language that is shining, surrounded, and stopped. Someone like your Reverend Takahashi, think about her poem, Marginal Wisdom.
What about it?
Well, hey, how about a little more enthusiasm? What do we want?
Wisdom from the margins.
When do we want it?
Now.
That's better. Okay, what jumps out at you from her words?
Life tells its truth in many hues. And I liked life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. Oh, and then there's let's see the fractions, the spectrums, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities.
And how did it end? The day is coming when all will know that the margins hold the center.
Yeah, that's where I ran into trouble. The margins hold the center. Hold is a word of support. It's what a parent does for an infant, or the spirit of life does for all of us. It's a good and loving thing to be held. It's what so many of us have been missing during the pandemic. Oppressed people at the margins of society don't really hold the center of power and privilege. They're not there to make it feel better. They don't nurture the systemic racism that is tangled up even well-intentioned white people in lives that perpetuate the impacts of past discrimination. Marginalized people often struggle just to hold each other up, sometimes against very long odds.
But there you have it. The poem implies that anytime you are involved in doing something grounded in unselfish love of the complexity of the world that is directed at the center where power and privilege reside, you are building beloved community from the center out. And anytime you dismantle something oppressive in the center, or when you decenter it by turning your attention to the margins, you are doing the work of building beloved community from the margins in. You are creating a system where the margins hold the center to the degree there is one. You're opening up the center to the wisdom of the margins.
Wow. Philly, that reminds me of an amazing thing I read this week. Michael Collins, who piloted the Apollo 11 spacecraft in orbit around the moon, while his fellow astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong descended to the lunar surface in 1969, died on Wednesday. He was 90. And in the obituaries, I read that 47 years ago, just 5 years after his flight to and around the moon, he wrote down what he recalled of his thoughts on the far side of the moon. He was completely cut off from radio contact with anyone else. He didn't even have one of his children's stuffed toys, a stuffy with him to remind him of human companionship. He thought to himself, I am alone now, truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. If account were taken, the score would be 3 billion plus 2 over on the other side of the moon, and 1 plus God only knows what on this side. Outside my window, I can see stars, and that is all. Where I know the moon to be, there is simply a black void.
So no one has ever been more marginalized than that, right?
Well, but only for less than an hour in his case. It was all set up to bring him back to his crewmates who had walked on the moon, and then to a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean and a hero's welcome back into the center of activity on what he now recognized as few of us have ever been able to recognize, is a fragile jewel of a planet. It was all one big communal adventure in solidarity with our vision of humans as animals willing to make extraordinary efforts and endure extraordinary danger to probe the mysteries of life itself. It was not the shallow solidarity the writer Valerie Carr says is based on the logic of exchange. I do something for you because you will do something for me. It's what she calls deep solidarity. It's rooted in recognition of who we really are. It's I show up for you because I see you as part of me. Your liberation is bound up in my own. And that's the real complexity about beloved community. We can't always do what everyone needs or wants. Beloved community isn't without its rough spots, losses, and sorrow, but it never loses its aim to act creatively, to honor each other's gifts and good intentions, because we are all bound up together as part of each other. What do you think about that feeling?
I'm overcome.
Well, I hope it's how you feel about CVUUS, that you're part of it.
Well, I certainly do. I want to be part of a beloved community.
So let's together say, blessed be and amen. And then don't you have something you need to do?
Yes, I do. I need a script that tells me what to say next.
Well, maybe you just better go back to your eggs.
I better go back to my eggs. And I do thank Carl. For playing my role in today. He's a wonderful owl, but he doesn't look much like my mate.
Well, I think that's probably to your benefit. You want to be the bigger one.
Yes, true
And
enough.
with that, I invite everybody into our closing interlude of music, and I'll see you on the other side with the benediction.
Love makes a bridge from heart to heart and hand to hand. Love finds a way when laws are blind and freedom banned. Love breaks the walls of language, gender, class, and age. Love gives us wings to slip the bars of every cage. Love lifts the hopes that force and fear have beaten down. Love breaks the chains and gives us strength to stand our ground.
By way of benediction, I want to answer a question I got from Carl in chat. Sometimes in life you lose the last line of your printout and you have to improvise. But if we're improvising on grounded in love, if we're improvising with the purpose of building beloved community, then we're actually enriching our life and we're better off without that last line having been given to us in print. And I invite you to go forth in that spirit this week as we seek to make the world the place we want it to be and seek to live into our UU values. Blessed be and amen.